Egypt is facing a crippling energy crisis, including gasoline shortages and rolling blackouts. Hello, I'm Anand Naidu in Washington, D.C., and this is The Heat. Once hailed as savior, he helped to overthrow President Mohammed Morsi and the Muslim Brotherhood. Now Egyptians are wondering if retired army forces chief turned President Abdul Fattah al-Sisi can solve the country's urgent economic problems. For weeks, the people have had to deal with frequent blackouts and fuel shortages. CCTV's Adel El-Makrouki joins us now from Cairo. And Adel, how serious is Egypt's energy crisis?
Well, it is quite serious. It has been exposed during the past 2 years, particularly, as you mentioned, when President Mohammed Morsi was in power last summer or a year ago exactly. It was exposed how fragile the Egyptian network is. There is a deficit of at least 3 gigabytes in the production versus the consumption at the peak levels from Egypt. And even though that Egypt is facing energy problems and also financing or subsidizing the fuel to run its electricity generators, yet even if it has full power, there's still a 3 gigawatt deficit, which is basically one of the main reasons for that. And this year it's just coming worse, and Egyptians are starting to feel the pressure once again. That's beside the regular fueling or gasoline crises that Egypt is going through or have been going ups and downs, and it so far seems to be quite stable, but the problem now is about the consumption, particularly to produce electricity.
Right, Adel, and how are ordinary Egyptians responding to these widespread blackouts and gas shortages?
Well, ironically, their reaction are less violent and less critical than it was when the Islamist President Mohammed Morsi was there. They are still critical, but the tone itself is not as strong. There are no mass protests organized to fight this or to resist this or show objection for the government, unlike what happened a year ago. Also, it has been taken more of in a sarcastic manner, so people are writing and sharing a lot of jokes on social media and in the streets. Beside the common, it has become a very common topic to discuss, and everyone really wants to discuss and talk about it. Now, many Egyptians would laugh and say that when they want to enjoy the dark, sometimes the light would come or the electricity would come up and just ruin this mood, in a sense that it has become more dark than having, or the blackouts are more prevailing than having electricity itself. It reached in some parts of Egypt to 20 hours of blackouts.
Well, at least people have a sense of humor, even in the worst, at the worst times. 2 other big issues besetting the country, that's shortage of water and food. What's the government doing to address those issues?
Well, Egypt is trying to raise the time, particularly in the water scarcity. Egyptians are already under the water security or the water poverty line. They have about, their share is about 600 cubic meters annually, which in reference to the poverty line is 1,000 cubic meters. And basically, Egypt is trying to at least preserve what it has from water share, particularly its share from the River Nile, which is the main source of water for the country. It represents 90% of Egypt's entire usage of water. And having the crisis in Ethiopia High Dam that would have threatened, or at least some Egyptians have been thinking that it would threaten their water security, particularly when Ethiopia starts reserving the water in the lake behind the dam itself.
You know, when the outside world looks at this, at Egypt, here we have a country which is an energy producer. It's an oil-producing country, and it has energy shortages. How did it get to that?
Well, basically, Anand, what happened is that usually Egypt's production used to be higher. In general, Egypt is not a very massive oil producer. It's the largest oil producer in Africa outside the OPEC organization. So it's the largest non-OPEC producer, but it's also the largest consumer in Africa. And that's put it in quite a situation. It has been, its production used to not just cover the consumption, but also there was a surplus for exporting. But starting 2008, the graph just shifted all the way up. The consumption increased tremendously and the production decreased. From 2009 to 2013, for example, the natural gas production from Egypt decreased 3% annually in these 4 years, and it still is decreasing. So there is, I mean, there are a lot of sites that have been still underdeveloped, offshores, particularly in the Mediterranean Sea, through which they need to be developed and to produce or to assist the decrease in this production. But the country is not, because of the 3 years of turmoil the January Revolution brought, it has been crippled, basically, to run or to have the capability to boost this industry and to run off with the development of these offshore sites.
All right, Adel, one question on political stability in the country. If you could keep this brief, please. You know, Egypt's seen a lot of turmoil in the last few years. It seems that, you know, there's something happening every year in the country. Do you expect another round of political turmoil?
Well, this is a big debate. It can't be just brief. But basically, there are some Egyptians who are expecting that there might be a third wave of the revolution, and if that happens, some analysts agree, if that happens, it will be more violent, it will be more chaotic than before. But what we've seen so far, and it all depends on the policies of the new president, Abdul Fattah al-Sisi. Will he form an inclusive Egypt? Will he try to tune down the tension with the Muslim Brotherhood and their supporters to sort out the mass killing of protesters that happened during the past period, particularly since Morsi was ousted, and his policies would eventually affect that. But also, beside politics, he has a very important economic role to lead, and if he successfully leads that, many expect that there will be no further turmoil. Economy is the key factor for Egypt, and this is what Abdel Fattah al-Sisi is realizing and is trying to move really fast in that path.
Thanks, Adel. CCTV's Adel El Makhrouki there, reporting from Cairo.